All right, with me now is the CEO of the Babylon Bee, Seth Dillon. Seth, we just did a panel together here at NatCon, but I snatched you away on the way to your lunch, so I do apologize for that.
If you can hear my stomach grumbling on the microphone, I apologize. It's a little too close.
It's like an awkward third person part of our interview.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so I want to talk about some of the things in a little more detail that we talked about in the panel. I want to talk about Facebook. I want to talk about fact checking. I want to talk about comedy in our politically correct culture. But first, I want to ask a question that's sort of a behind the scenes question at your company, at the Babylon Bee. And it basically just has to do with how sensitive our culture is. But have you personally, or has anybody at your company, on behalf of your company, made a joke or published a headline that that you regret?
Oh, good question. The way you phrased that, do we regret it?
Yeah.
I would say yes. There probably was one that we regret. We actually got a lot of heat. We took heat for a joke that we made after this prominent kind of televangelist figure's death. And it was a joke about, because she was one of these televangelists who preaches about like health and wealth and
prosperity gospel
stuff. And it was some joke about how like that message didn't save her or something. And it was just kind of really insensitive right on the heels of her death. And we took a lot of heat for that and kind of learned from it, I think, that it's like, a lot of this is about timing. You want to hit the right timing and you don't want to be insensitive to a family that's mourning somebody, So there was a clear point that our writers were trying to make with that, in a valid point, I think, but probably the wrong time. So yeah, I'd say that one's probably a regret. I think most of the time that we get heat for our jokes, it's not something that we regret. In fact, the fact that we're getting a lot of pushback means that we were really onto something. It means we were over the target. So generally, I wouldn't say that we regret the ones that are controversial. But in that case, I'd say, yeah, there is one, at least one that we regret.
So, and this is very interesting because on the panel, you were saying that someone asked you about what standards you use at your company, and your answer was, well, there are no standards, but the way to be a good comedian is to be funny, but then also to attack an idea. And if a person happens to be someone who's embracing that idea, then they might be caught up in that joke, but to not be personally malicious towards that person. And maybe this is an example of one that was going after the person primarily, even though the prosperity gospel is heretical by Christian.
Yeah, we weren't targeting her as a person. It was really the ideas. It's just, it happened to, it was a very—
It felt personal to people.
It felt personal, especially because of the timing of it. It was very near her death. So, that's the kind of thing where you get into a gray area. You have to make a judgment call on that. But generally, yeah, I mean, if the purpose is to go after the ideas, then we're not too worried about how the person might feel, especially if they're a public figure. They are putting their ideas out there publicly, and those ideas are subject to ridicule if they deserve it. So,
and they do in this day and age, on both sides of the aisle.
Often they do.
No, I think our viewers are interested in the behind the scenes because your headlines are funny. I mean, I follow you on Instagram and Twitter, and I don't get on Facebook that often anymore, to be honest.
Me either.
But they almost always make me laugh. I have a family group chat with all of my sisters and my brother and my parents, and oftentimes,
texting back and forth.
Yeah, your memes show up in our group chat. So we all love them. Talk to me a little bit about the censorship that you face. I face the same thing on Facebook. We get these fake fact checks from companies sponsored by Facebook.
Right.
Facebook acts like it's these neutral, independent, third-party fact checkers.
Right.
But you're not a news organization.
No, we're not. And jokes didn't used to have, like, imagine, okay, if you rewind before the social media era, imagine going to like a stand-up comedy show, and in the middle of like Jerry Seinfeld's joke, he tells some joke about, I don't know, something that happened on the subway, and you stand up and say, that's not true, instead of laughing, or just not laughing because you didn't think it was funny. Like that would be ridiculous. Everybody would look at you like you were a weirdo because you just fact-checked a joke, right?
It would actually be a stand-up comedian's like dream come true, because that's the perfect heckler to go after.
It's great, right? Yeah, they look like a joke. And that's exactly the environment that we have now. Everyone's used to it now, and everyone's kind of just accustomed to this fact-checking stuff happening. But it really is absurd and silly that they're rating jokes false or true, because jokes don't have a truth value. They don't have a truth value. Now, there may be truth to a joke, and that's why the joke is funny. But the claim that they say they're fact-checking, which is a satirical headline, is not in fact a claim. It's not a claim to be factual at all. So it's really silly. But there's a purpose for it. I mean, obviously the purpose for it is they can't just take down a satire site they don't like. That would be a bad look. But they can just saddle you with all these fact checks that then de-rank you in their algorithms because you're an unreliable news source. And then they can just throttle your reach and choke you off from reaching your audience. So there's creative and conniving ways they can censor you without just simply saying, oh, you're not welcome here because we don't like your viewpoint. And I think that's happening a lot with the fact checking. It's happening a lot with the accusations of spreading hate speech under the guise of satire and stuff like that. So
it's even sneakier too, because if you read the fact checks, which I do, if you read the fact checks, they don't even claim that you are necessarily doing something wrong now, because they don't want to be accused of going after you, whether it's me as a political commentator, you as a comedian. They actually say people, meaning your audience, might misperceive what you're saying. So they actually put the onus on this faceless group of people that they're degrading by saying, well, you must be too stupid to understand what is being said here. And it's, I don't know, what has your process been as a company? Have you talked to Facebook? What have they said to you when you've reached out to them and appealed these ridiculous fact checks?
Well, for one thing, let me make one point on that, because when people believe satire, that's an indictment of whoever you're satirizing, not an indictment of satire. It means there's truth to the point that you're making, right? So if we tell a joke about Trump, like I mentioned this one on our panel about how Trump had said he had done more for Christianity than Jesus himself, and that went viral. It went crazy viral. Now, why did it go viral? Because people thought it was true. They really did. Now, a lot of people who follow our site shared it because they thought it was funny.
It was funny.
But a lot of other people, especially people on the left, it went viral on the left. There were New York Times reporters who were sharing that piece, thinking it was true. The reason they thought it was true is because it tapped into the truth that Trump has a big ego, and he says outlandish things like that. So it's very believable. So that's really an indictment of Trump, not us, that was
It's not even an indictment of the audience either, by the way, because that's what Facebook does. Facebook actually, like I said, they almost insult the people that see content. But it's not, because the reason the audience believes it is because it's believable.
It's believable.
Based on the person.
So reality is the problem. Reality is the problem. Reality is too close to satire, not the other way around. So that gets reversed and flipped around all the time. But you're right, it's not the audience's fault. We're not pulling one over on the audience. They like to say, Snopes used to fact check us and say that we had fooled our readers. To fool someone is to intentionally deceive them, right? That's the definition of to fool someone. And that's not what's happening. We're trying to entertain people, make them laugh, make them think, whatever. And they're not really deceived. They're just, it is believable. Satire is believable. And the history of satire is long, and it's a rich one of people thinking it's real, because good satire is, in fact, tethered to the truth very closely. If you divorce a joke from the truth so far that no one could possibly believe it was true, no one would think it was funny.
Right.
So that's an important point. What was it about the company, though, that you want to know about?
Do you reach out to Facebook? Because I know, let me give you an example. We reach out to Facebook, so we're demonetized probably like once a month, right? And we appeal the process, but it's an automated process. It's algorithmic. And sometimes they overturn it, and then if it's overturned, maybe a week later, we get demonetized again. And it's difficult to get an actual answer from Facebook. It's difficult to even get a hold of a real person, even when you are a creator that is making money for Facebook. Not just making money yourself, but making money for them. They are a community, a network that relies on creators. They need advertising money. They need people to be making money, but you can't get a hold of them. What does your company do to combat this?
A couple things. So we don't have a lot of success reaching out to them directly either. I mean, we have contacts at Facebook who often ignore our emails, don't respond to them for extended periods of time, and if they do, they'll send us like a link to like the help desk that has an article about the issue that's not really about the issue. We've tended to see the best response by generating media attention. So when we have a situation where we've gotten flagged, like we wrote a piece about how Amy Coney Barrett was being compared to a duck to determine whether or not she was a witch, which is like a silly Monty Python joke, if you're familiar with the old Monty Python movies. And that was deemed by Facebook, by their algorithms, to be hate speech, right? So we got dinged for that, and we had a violation on our page, and we were threatened with demonetization. So we appealed it. We went through the automated process. We talked about it, set an appeal. Facebook reviews it, and a person reviews it and upholds the ruling and says that this is, in fact, hate speech. So the next thing you know, like, I'm talking to Shannon Bream about it on Fox.
Wiccans or against ducks?
I don't know.
What is this even supposed to be?
It was an incitement to violence. It was incitement to violence. It was like we were calling for violence against Amy Coney Barrett or something. So I was on Shannon Bream talking about it. I did a lot of interviews and drew attention to it. And the next thing you know, Facebook's reaching out to us saying, we're sorry, we got this one wrong. So we found, and this is not the only time, there's been plenty of times where we've done that, where we will just go straight to the media and say, look what Facebook is doing. And then we get a response from Facebook. But generally speaking, when we reach out to them directly, it's just crickets, or they're feeding us some lines, and it's just not helpful.
And I think the reason that this is really useful to talk about the behind the scenes stuff is because a lot of conservative creators are facing the same thing, and a lot of our audiences wonder what can be done to help if there's, these big tech companies have such power over our heads. How do you as an individual fight back?
Right, now as an individual, it's different because an individual doesn't have the platform that we have.
That's why we're the voice for the voiceless, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Tucker Carlson doesn't want to talk to some random person. Like if you have a big brand though, and you're well known and Facebook's coming after you, he might platform that and give that a voice. It's hard to give that voice to individuals, and it's happening to so many of them. No one knows about what they're dealing with. No one knows about the censorship that they're experiencing because there's no attention brought to that, and they don't have that. So we benefit greatly from the fact that we have a very large audience who's very supportive when these things happen, and also we get the media attention from a media that is interested in knowing what's going on with us on both sides. Like, we get criticism from the left and support from the right. So, you know, individuals really have it rough because they have no recourse. None.
Right. Now, because of that, I try, as a creator who has a similar platform, I try to be very cognizant of my responsibility and my duty to take action when there is action to be taken, because I know that I have a unique space where I can actually enact change, where a lot of times individuals in that situation couldn't do that.
Have you ever taken legal action?
We have not taken legal action. I think that there's been opportunities that we could have. That's what I consider to be the last recourse. I would like to go through their appeals process, make a fuss about it. And, you know, there certainly is a place for litigation, for legal action here. Facebook, as you know, is a very hard place to sue because of their terms of service. They certainly favor themselves in their terms, which I guess if you're just talking in a business sense, I can't blame them for.
Well, the courts have favored them a lot too.
Certainly.
So, you know, the courts have favored social media. They've interpreted Section 230, for example, extremely broadly, extravagantly, as Justice Thomas would say, so that these companies really have a lot of leeway to play with in terms of having their cake and eating it too. You know, acting like these neutral platforms that just host people's ideas, but then also acting like publishers who are discriminating against, you know, some content versus other. And because of the way the courts have handled that, it does make it very difficult when there's precedent there for them to have so much leeway like that, for anybody to make any forward movement, you know, by taking action against them. We've had success some with the media, you know, when the media maligns us or something, you know, sending a demand letter or something like that.
Which is almost easier. I mean, you guys, you got a retraction from the New York Times taking legal action. Congratulations on that, as you should. That was deserved.
They called us a far-right misinformation site that sometimes traffics in misinformation under the guise of satire. So,
oh, that's a stretch even for the New York Times. A real stretch. They must have had Nicole Hannah-Jones help with that one.
They took it back.
She's pretty good at reframing things. Okay, favorite joke that you've ever made?
Ooh, tough one. All right, so going back to the prosperity thing, we did one about Joel Osteen sailing his yacht through the flooded streets of Houston following that hurricane. I think it was Hurricane Harvey or something like that, handing out copies of Your Best Life Now, his book. And that one went crazy viral because it was pretty brutal.
Well, didn't he refuse to host people in his center?
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, he was kind of the center of a lot of media attention and talk at the time. And so we took the opportunity to like poke at his theology a little bit and how that theology doesn't preach to people who are in a flooded town. And so, you know, that was really the goal. It wasn't to attack him personally. Again, it was to attack the theology, right? The idea that we're going after. That one went crazy viral. It was one of the first ones that got like media attention back in like 2017 when we were still new. So that's a great one. But we've had other ones that just went super viral and were a lot of fun, like the motorcyclist who identifies as a bicyclist and sets world record, got shared like 6 million times.
Oh my goodness.
The one that a recent favorite of mine though is that when Trump said that he's done more for Christianity than Jesus himself. That one went viral and it was rated false, but then it came true a couple months ago when he went on a radio show and said, I have in fact done more for religion and Christianity than any other person in history. He just said that a couple months ago.
Do you think he saw your satire first?
I mean, he does follow us, so maybe, well, he did back when he had a Twitter anyway. He might have seen it, but maybe we gave him the idea to say that. I don't know. But I love it because, okay, how do you handle that? So now Snopes has to change the rating. Is it true now? I mean, they fact-checked it false. I don't know, but
you should ask them. You should reach out to them and ask them because I know. I mean, it's going to be funny regardless.
Exactly. We should. We should try to get an official statement from Snopes. Trump said this, so why'd you rate it false?
Yes.
So another one, I mentioned this in our panel, but the one about how the Ninth Circuit Court had overruled the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. It was so absurd that they fact-checked that.
How can you fact-check that? That's not even possible in the physical world.
It's not even possible. You can't overrule somebody's death, right? Unless they brought her back from the dead, which is...
You think there's be more headlines about it if that had actually
You would
happened.
think so. You should be able to find that story somewhere.
Yeah.
The National Review called it like the most ridiculous fact check in history or something like that.
I think that's accurate,
and I think it's probably fair because it was just such an absurd story. Although the washing machine story was crazy too when we said that CNN had purchased an industrial-sized washing machine to spin the news in. That got fact-checked too.
These are some of the best of the best.
So yeah, so the fact that they are fact-checking those make them my favorites because we're like, print that out, put it on the wall that we got fact-checked.
Well, it also means that you're making your ideological point too, right?
Yeah.
Because if it gets under their skin, then it means that they know that there's the truth, the grain of truth in it, and people don't like being made fun of when they know they're wrong.
They don't. They don't. And especially people in power like to maintain their power by suppressing people who criticize them. So, You know, you can tell who holds the power based on who you're not allowed to joke about, who you're not allowed to criticize.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I would say keep up doing the great work that you're doing. I know I enjoy it, so it's a selfish request. So please keep up the headlines, keep up the memes.
As long as we can, as long as you still have a platform.
And we'll do everything we can to make sure that that's the case. I will let you get to your lunch as long as you promise not to do what Dave Rubin did and eat a fish sandwich.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I want to eat a fish sandwich.
No, please don't. I've
got more interviews. I don't want to be blowing fish into people's
That's why
faces.
I didn't eat Chipotle before this. Seth, thank you for being on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
And anybody who wants access to this a week prior, then you can see it on YouTube. You can subscribe, VIP status, become a supporter on the Liz Wheeler Show community on Locals. That is lizwheelershow.com/locals. We will see you over there. If you haven't already, give this video a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button below, and ring the bell to make sure you never miss a video.